Okay, so this is about New York City, America. We're in this trap. Other countries, A through Z, we're in this trap. It knew that since before our modern countries, semi-ancient countries will be blaming other things, others ourselves, when defending themselves, as how defending themselves as fact treatment nature, simultaneously, offensively, defensively, and hyper simultaneously, whereas increasingly self-valued as criminal insidiousness nature. Now, this is where, and increasingly valuing being and having been fact cheaping nature enslaved. No matter if you're the most wealthiest person of any land or area or state, you're only going to be over locations, areas, and states criminally foreign influence, and that criminally having been legalized. And everyone pretending such is debatable rather than allowing people to use what is hyper evidential. People defending styles of having used words, values like data, like evidence, like identity, like like sequence and simultaneous, the value of what is actually simultaneously recorded, for example. So, in other words, there is not language is about the identity of engineering, of electrical engineering. There's three volumes at once. It is distinctly and not distinct, while distinctly, non distinctly, and simultaneously itself, as life juxtaposed with matter, as space juxtaposed with matter, space slash existence, as space slash existence not juxtaposed with matter. After that, you know, or as distinctly two ways, before it and after it. Where, and this is where and how we are forever nature, which is one of the ways it stays constantly itself. And now this is where and how it was exploited. I'm gonna show you, like, this shows the world how computers work better than and more finite than how computers work, while as how they work. So no, if one of the columnists went in to speak about use short words and what was actually hyper evidential, per the breaching method, they would have to give examples that would use other people's names. They were to show that which is invisible but still discernible. To speak about that which is invisible but still discernible, the individual grouped in together the parts of the languages slash languages. We have to speak about the invisible but discernible. So the subject distinctly from the invisible but still discernible predicate or verb, and how that changes, how the nature of a verb has an identity of relationship to itself, not just to the subject, or if it's alone, or not just to the sentence. Anything discernible is only invisible but still discernible, even grouped in together. It's still only to be in demonstration of how that has to be studied simultaneously with the hyper invisible but still discernible, as one of the things that the hyper and simultaneous is, as an increasing value relative to all subject treatments and slash subjects, as that which originally and still generated and is generating things, and having generated things, been generating things out of nowhere. No, because evolution science makes it per its system. See, there's evolution science. They made all exceptions to how to make positive value nature progressions at all identity ground locations. They made industries individually grouped and together at all identity ground locations. Databases oriented not just for the money, for the syntax captivation of A through Z people. Now, and the method knew that nature would continue to increasingly demonstrate this, increasingly know, and how differentially increasingly, because that differential was put in by the laws. But by as a method that is using nature's demonstration of itself, most criminal enterprises do not want to be caught. At the same time, the opposite is true. For example, for the relevance of what is simultaneous, like hyper-simultaneous, and its possession of the motivations of people and the defenses of it, because its nature is continually demonstrating its motivations, being and having been at value / s that are inseparable from the questions about history, no matter which country you are in. So it is hyper evidential that England does not remember the history and the evolution of English properly, because the locations, areas, and states of semi-ancient countries or semi-ancient lands, they had already become uses of the sciences abridged, criminally re-engineered from the state and from the projection, from the positive value nature progressions, evolution they had been revealed for and as by nature itself before humanity became criminally foreign influence, and with the sciences involved with it. And per the method, as victims, blaming other things, others, ourselves through counters, even when correctly, doing it in the furtherance of more, and so the defenses of everyone's fact, treatment, nature, qualities, aspects, premises, treatments. For example, our evidences, being and having been self-value, people A through Z, criminally foreign influence, simultaneously delusions raw. So what made differentially sickly everyone hurt, but differentially increasingly. And that's critical because it knew that we would be able to see. It knew every person of the species body doesn't like really the causes. And there, every one of the species body will discern that there are things we all don't like. But the only time people can agree with what we don't like or what we do like, it's in the furtherance of what's preventing us to counter what we don't like the most. So they're keeping exceptions and roles with murders, for example, just to say that, with their motivations, because they're being used remotely. All identity sophistication had other replaced, was what our founding parents left us to discern. So it's a little identity theft, fraud, slander method against every single person, sickly, distinctly, and it effectively kept and keeps people from discerning because they won't let us speak on time what we're actually capable of speaking at each age of fact, treatment, nature, and or they sense it and confess, demonstrate, and record what has already been and having been manifest. The overt criminal enterprises, plural, private ones, hundreds of countries individually grouped and together, each age of their fact, treatment, nature, are being and having been shared here and there, tactical ulterior from how we are bound actually by nature, and how that is increasingly as its own entity, as your own complete identity is present with all the distinct identities of your body. There is one identity of hyper-simultaneous that, for example, which is to account for what is distinctly, not just the there is an omnipresence that is hyper simultaneously discernible. But see, even that is invisible but still discernible. And it as itself, the hyper simultaneous, as value, has it is distinctly, non-distinctly, and simultaneous, hyper simultaneously further, greater than and more finite than the definition of the omnipresent, while as its definition. So the only way, in other words, we need a scientific value about the hyper simultaneous. But the only way, even we could discern or use it, is through contemplation and a quality of fact treatment, or premises treatment, fact treatment nature qualities and aspects that has been prevented the revelations, like right there when with treatments of black and white, black/white with all the colors. The breaching method put that in there. The breaching method kept employed. The slavery kept North America and South America, which is increasingly, like, thank God nature itself is going to demonstrate negative value nature progressions, acts, and natures. When I say thank God, that means not to make positive out of negative. It means make hyper positive, where how it comes out anyway. At all exceptions are a demonstration of the same thing. In other words, if we stay systems that aren't its value system, it's completion of our complete positive making more of itself. Takes our temporary positive and the quality of we are additionally to it simultaneously, forced away from here lethal high D's. As, for example, a criminal insidiousness, nature like a wrongdoer, associated with criminal enterprises, or that person is going to make, especially legalized criminal insidious natures, still criminally legalized or still remotely used, was off the record. Everyone, A through Z. Imagine what was sustained while everyone's playing. Okay, this is the business, the value system. That's against the law. Don't speak up against that. Not just or speak up against that. Well, you're not going to speak up against that. Someone try to call out like to fake sides, fake arrays where people are reporting on themselves as roles with data reception, racketeering worse than war crimes, evidence perception, racketeering worse than war crimes, identity reception, racketeering worse than war crimes, the value of sequence reception worse than wartime, the value of simultaneous reception worse than war crimes. What is simultaneously actually recorded? For example, what is the value of witch trials? You know that slavery was entrenched since before our founding parents too. So what was the value of that? Simultaneously, we studied what it was. It was a form of slavery. Slavery, what else was that? Coupled with it was torture. We never addressed that. We never addressed the how coupled simultaneously with it, identity theft is clear as day. Identity fraud, identity slander, clear as day. They've been making mistakes in courts because they're a certain type of victim that had replaced the short words when they were young, when everyone wants to say what we are told we have, which is strength. If we have strength now in all these cars, why are we still in the rat trap, slavery trap, worse than that, wanting to be called it, or so could be, or have someone call other people it actually, so good sense that it was used remotely, not just as colonies, north and south. Enslaved fact cheaping nature rolls with it. In other words, it grouped the countries too, the lands. and themselves. Since semi-ancient times, they lost the way for mind, that which would have been revealed by people following the value of that which is actually hyper-simultaneous, that which is actually its identity of relationship to itself, that is actually positive, always. Again, it shows us how it could be positive, temporary positive could still be negative. Everything is in demonstration of a trinity, exceptions in exception nature. The relevance to everything. Nothing is bullying alone. For example, the people who would like to debate this need to debate this offensively. They need to. Increasingly, they got away with it and get away with it because individually grouped in together, there are natures of corruption that having been self-valued by the certain type of victim that people A through Z are, who came through campuses A through Z, or they had no education, whatever, all locations, each age of correlation nature, individually grouped in together. They are measured and maintained, enslaved, tortured, identity theft, fraud, slander, victims. Per this method, that knew that everyone would only be able to discern and be a quality of fact human nature, needed to be in order to counter properly and overcome, to be at last freedom, not just liberty, too. In other words, needing to count for when the course of human events has to counter a breaching method, but first needing to secure unities and to counters themselves being and having been self-valued, being and having been employed by the breaching method. That wasn't the cause of anybody, so everyone individually grouped in together was just blaming other things, others, ourselves. The real cause of negative value, nature, progressive act, nature, even when they were doing it right, syntactically, functionally. And that built and kept and keeps, measured and maintained. Effectively, self-cultivated. Self means to the self-cultivation of roles with it, its styles of logic. That quality of fact, human nature forced at all locations. Sequence shifts increasingly relevant to this. For example, where people make color treatments, they only allow they only allow pretended honesty after people are not young anymore. Because the youngest kids, when I was in grammar school, I knew how to use, I knew how to discern people lying to me about their emotions and passions relevant to American history. Per the increasing value, only positive unto itself, of being able to discern how constantly, distinctly constantly, Native American rights and Black rights, as labeled by the system, and people just, what we have to say. They're not. We're going to debate. If we want to debate that, we're not allowed equality of fact, human nature, to bring in evidence is probably use what is hyper evidential. That's in other words, but there's a method behind it. There's a method /S. So rather than say, okay, well, this is mine, now you make your expression, you make your free speech. See, people have to pretend that they're more and more. They have to pretend that they're for freedom of expression, rather than being for freedom of speech, because of how all locations individually grouped together. Built roles with sequence shifts, identity theft, fraud, method, slash S, which I tell best, but long. Till Mendy's course to follow for come home. So they've been replacing, the FBI has roles replacing that which is actually being having been recorded. And with other police forms, state police, Weathersfield police. So they are not allowed to tell on hierarchies. And since they were kids, they're leaving out exceptions in exception nature. Since they were kids, there were roles with the planting of evidences that is simultaneous to ones that were already planted that are increasingly being and having been used by the breaching method. So there is being and having been entertained what can't be entertained. So they have predators only allowed to be manifest per where and how, what I'm telling best. For example, they replaced what is actually recorded over the phones with fabricated audio and video. Weathersfield police, they switch names, forge names, and they pretend that, they bring in more falsified police reports, more names. They name stack. And with other people attaching me and others to fake conversations with themselves and others about this. And it all goes back to my grammar school with a method where the executive branch and the political branch, I found out how it's each of the branches at the campuses, pretending passions and emotions, and where and how originally and still overt criminal enterprises, plural, private ones. All exceptions and exception nature tied to the interbranches and themselves individually grouped and together as their methods themselves as actually recorded and as their natures as actually recorded, as criminal insidiousness natures of positive and negative treatment, having been self-valued through all kinds of motivations they need interest and used therefore. For all kinds of motivations, needs, interest, but also that being and having been used by the one singular breaching method, /S. So computers are still forced, tricked, or persuaded to mimic now not only how nature works, but how the breaching method works. You jerks. That also includes the all formal database relationships, the way they are manifest, because nature has executive branch, judicial branch, political branch, and exception nature tied to them. That's how modern countries A through Z are manifest. That's how they came from manifest from before. Recorded self-value through time with defenses of the sense and sensibilities beyond the theater positive treatments and the theater negative treatments simultaneously, and the theater identity treatments, identity worth treatments. Through history, they're self-valued, criminally foreign influence, and simultaneously being and having been effectively self-valued delusions wrought too. Self-valued that way because it's relevant to where and how it's being and having been used remotely, and where and how we work as identities, value/value progression, as invisible but still discernible, and the hyper invisible but still discernible. Apart with the hyper simultaneous, distinct, non-distinct, and simultaneous relationship to all parts of space/existence. So they also know and sense if you're labeled white because you're Italian/Irish in Weathersfield, and you care about the Native Americans since you were a little kid, you were made to appreciate them. And black rights, as in civil rights, not just as civil rights, but as civil rights, but also how Native American rights and black rights are constantly, increasingly, sickly, distinctly differentiated from everyone else's, the victim of that fake integrity of science /S that is simultaneously with and including the branch of government individually grouped together. All exceptions are tied to them, kept originally and still with overt criminal enterprises, private ones, and that insidiousness of people in A through Z, and people on off body dumping spots, on off the names brought up, and clicks brought up by people in communications with investigations and investigators from the youngest ages and their family members, and with database relationships since before computers. That's where and how they used humanity remotely, enslaved here from overseas, as a method that was so effective that our founding parents had to hide their actual roles. With that, we actually led up to the Constitutional Convention and the Declaration of Independence. So we could not have independence. They were just declaring it. How could we have independence when North and South, sickly distinctly, they're entrenched with things like slavery, the whole ground's tactically denatured. Everyone, people are making positive treatments, negative treatments, collusion against identity, and they're hiding from that. Well, that's what the court decided. You're a witch. Witch trials. They bring up the witch trials they measured and maintained while they made Salem, Massachusetts famous for the witch trials. They held measured and maintained then and now. That everyone leaves out where and how the witch trials place in Wethersfield, Connecticut, right next to where George Washington had to leave slavery entrenched in Wethersfield, Connecticut, right before the last battle of the Revolutionary War, having had to secure means through counter extortion to the narratives that once affected the breaching method itself, forced everyone so scared and only capable of defending themselves by furthering roles we would put up and did put up, that the Constitution should be unabridged, and that we should have free speech, and that we should have the value of sequence not denied, because they've been roles still with interbranch databases and with private databases, and all exception tied to the interbranch too, and intersciences further, and it grouped science, how the sciences group further per a method that effectively kept and keeps those people needing to hide lab progressions to all locations. Also, there are I don't know if there are 5 gens, but there's a Jennifer that lives near Lenny Triglia. I don't know her last name. Eric Jensen told me stories about her when I was in high school, but I never met her in high school. They tried to make an exception when I was after high school because they had involved the people on Hangdog Lane, with people on my street, within O'Brien family, with the executive branch, from classrooms that weren't even my classroom, but they were my grade, with people that were there with this method that won't let people speak about this, and they're demonstrating the ones that pretend that they're for or against hate speech. The ones they're lying about their passions and emotions because their roles having been identified theft, fraud, sequence shift, planting evidences with their kids, fake verbally, pretending emotions and passions to others and to the individuals group themselves. And to, everyone, all fake. Everyone's defending what can't be defended and simultaneously have or afford counters proper to that which is actually recorded as the breaching method, increasingly relevant where we are factored in nature. And how they got away with it is because where and how, whatever you are labeled, anything that's not labeled Black or Native American, see, that's constantly, discernibly, overtly / insidiously civil rights types forced by that, differentially by the overt criminality, all kinds of excuses, but also by formal roles with offensive evidence perception, data reception, identity reception, racketeering worse than war crimes, sequence shifts, racketeering worse than war crimes, illusions with that, uses of it, like in the Ninth Circuit Court next to World Trade Center Towers right before the attack. People involved with Sandy Hook recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed, planting and having planted evidences, including per uses of sense and sensibilities of people tied to murders and people murdered, and the responses of it, where and how they use confessions and statements to confess, demonstrate, record, roles with military members involved with identity thefts and frauds, and with uses of exceptions at locations, uses of arrays of people, where they're in the background pretending people make, he's making all these, he's using all these, or everyone's bad. These are all just a lot of people that work for the three branches of government. They bring a whole bunch of names in when they bring after a falsified police report. And the police have the FBI criminally involved with them, and with the locations involved, intercities through time. Control your mind. Each one. Boxing is fun. So what everyone has to understand simultaneously, the only reason we haven't discerned that so easily to discern is because how it is differentially how everyone else's rights are hurt, but how it is differentially increasingly. And the breaching method /S had nothing to do with anyone else's motivations, nature's interests, good or bad. Everything had to do about identity of the ground's voices treatments, identity of the ground titles treatments, identity of the ground name treatments, family treatments, neighbor treatments, with values when we speak, when our sense and sensibilities. Because there's a method by that. They're lying about their motivations, nature's needs, interests. So people with the intelligence community involved with the name Cololo, and with the name Phil Cololo also. They didn't say which Cololo, additionally to that. And on YouTube and or on Facebook, one of the Ray Cololos confirmed roles, but he was implying I was roles with it, where how they were roles. They brought that up. The roles with various natures of drugs, as the police forms have allowed to be involved with it since they were kids, but they were using it to fabricate people, to fake locations, fake ties to themselves, fake natures of ties to themselves, uses of the neighbors, of people that another uses of the kids, of bosses, of people that work for bosses, and lies about the kids of the bosses. Specifically, also multi-front on formal roles and with locations, arrays acted so people could pretend that stuff was real. Where and how they are manifest as actually recorded. Knaves, criminally foreign influence, simultaneously delusion, draw. Those who pretend freedom was spoken for. Those who pretend the Constitution was spoken for. New York City is if you ever see any city, there's a people stacking that's vertical and horizontal, and that where and how it is actually recorded, all exceptions, exception nature, are being and haven't been self-valued. Sense and sensibility, all kinds of needs, interests, motivations, natures, the persuasions, to blame on other things, others themselves, or do whatever to keep anyone from using that which is hyper evidential regarding where and how. Fluent through all parts individually grouped in together of New York City, for example, are proofs of the influence of a breaching method upon our human identity, the ground's identity of relationship to itself, and the value of that, and of our means to discern it, to learn it well. So even where black treatments are used, they are simultaneously used with physical delusions juxtaposed with criminal foreign influences and people pretending they want calm and peace. Campus Marcius rises in the East. So we need to have mandated law followed, and we have to have it at the youngest grades, where they are sensing who's gonna be righteous and herding it out and keeping them fake. They use all kinds of tricks to pretend they had normal social interactions with other people. That all kept needing to hide sequence shifts. Roles with the interbranch that were criminally foreign influence within and now before. In other words, our countries don't like to tell. They can't counter each other where they're fake with each other, and we have our kids shared here and there. Per themselves, they recorded to demonstrate they're hiding behind this. That's one of the things they're hiding behind with the Joshua Stryker and former director of the FBI, and some judges' families associated with the Della Fair family, and some Hartford courts associated with some military police families, Kolvenskis families, and Eric Burgess, and their roles with fire departments, people on off Webb School involved with former Reno Mazzucato and Joshua Schumack with Police Chief Cintron, and 1 years ago with the same house, involved with a whole bunch of people that have been planting evidences with sheriffs, all kinds of, they validate themselves as people that have been involved criminally foreign influence since they were kids, putting fake things in databases and like the sequence shifts relevant. So a former Mayor Gold's daughter, Debbie Gold, she talks me a whole bunch of fake places, locations. She has roles with people on off Hangdog Lane, where it runs into Two-Route Highway, and that runs into the Burlington Turnpike. And Hangdog Lane also runs into Route 3, which there are a whole bunch of police recorded with Route 3 intercedes through time. And there are a whole bunch of people with South Korea, for example, associated with Taekwondo places. They have roles with federal crimes, with databases, federal crimes, with federal rules of evidences, with the Joshua Stryker, and people at Trinity College, and people at Wethersfield campuses through time, recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed, influenced by various natures of courts, judges, and prosecutors, intercities, since they were kids, to plant evidences and to slander people and to sequence shift, and to lie about their motivations, and to lie about what they think about other. Even when they're telling the truth, they're leaving out the forcing quality of fact-checking nature that prevents what's actually recorded from being demonstrated. So people at Trinity College said there are more people with the name Olson, a Matt Olson and Eric Olson. I don't know them. They tried to make an exception to pretend that I had not any words with them next to Trinity College years ago, which is also the roles with Mr. Neville, associated with the Southstein Middle School, other campuses in Wethersfield. Now there's a Dr. Graham who also recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed roles with Joshua Julian, involved with the Facebook page of a principal sex offender before it was caught. And he and more were involved then on the campus and further. They recorded themselves pretending other consciously because they don't know, but they know to an extent. And they were using the corners of the streets with the news media too, has been roles fabricating emails with child sex offenders, leaders of the kids. Because the interranch kids had their kids there too. And there had been roles with a wire crime, a whole bunch of different wire crimes acts and methods, distinctly, non-distinctly, and simultaneously, a whole bunch of Connecticut media locations at once. And these are people used by the the shell game that the FBI and other agencies and their family members with overt criminal enterprise, private ones, all that, on off locations together, roles with kept needing to hide the same sequences, finite, progressive lies, identity theft, fraud, slander roles, relevant to where and how we have to be able to counter what's non-distinctly hurting every single person. Now, and we can't be debating with that with people that, are victim predators already, and they know they can't afford quality of fact treatment nature because they've been affording all that only manifest because the constituencies as locations, areas, and states of the Democrats and of the Republicans and other exceptions tied to them, like the exception nature, all self-valued, criminal, foreign influence, premises treatments, fact treatment, nature, qualities, aspects. In nature itself is criminal insistence relevant where and how they make opinions / convictions and regarding the value of what other people say. The sequence shifts reveal this. They reveal that and how way more. So there are some immoral people, and there are people with the business next to an Arch Pizza where it was on Route 3 in Rocky Hill, which is also involved with some mayors and their family members who a Faenza family recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed are also involved with police forms associated with Kevin Dillon and other and his Anna Dillon or Annie Dillon. And there's a Pat Vincent. I never had a conversation with in my life. He's also one of the ones that were recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed, involved with kids and families all along Route 3 that had lies told to them about me. And there's no way to counter it too, without making it worse, because in other words, then it makes it look like people have had motivations and passions they didn't. Whereas and how you have to be able to tell when you can tell people that approached you that you don't know are lying to you and lying with others. So people from Local 230 are recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed by some girls having been abused a whole bunch of different ways by people associated with Eric Oliveri and a Joshua Stryker and the military families involved with the shipping families and uses of my name with the people at the corners of the streets, like on Griswold Street and Fairlane Drive. There was some girl, I don't know her name. Now these are people that were brought up by all these predicate acts of the Wethersfield police, forging and switching names. 3 times they used Hartford Hospital to hide what I caught them doing with people they had with their patients and criminals before they forced me those 3 times. They were recorded with my location involved with predicate acts with kids and off campuses. They have families through time with the policing of the campuses. They have something to do with the leaderships of the stores and their policing at the shopping centers and through different ownerships of it. It has one on Town Line Drive. I don't know if, in other words, there's a Pamdall family that has ties with some kid. I don't know his name. I don't know if he went to his schools, but he's involved with the location next to the Wethersfield Police Department, that shopping center there, and where Town Line Drive. the policing there. He's involved with identity thefts and frauds against me, with some other people also. I don't know if the Wethersfield with town offices and where the Wethersfield Police Department used to be right there. No. And there are the corners of the street there. Also, people use my name that are involved with identity thefts, frauds, all sorts of rules of falsified police reports, wire crimes, mail crimes. And they had rules with class placements. The people that were putting class placements with me, that had connections to them, and uses of the emotion, as fakes. As in other words, for other people. I'm not trying to call anybody fake. In other words, and when people are fake, I'm referring to the sequence shifts. See, they aren't, and the name switching and forging police, and the wire crime acts and methods. This is worse than just extortion. When I say thank God, it's so. Not only does nature demonstrate negative value, nature progression to acts, nature's like predicate acts, nature's like criminal instances, wrongdoers, when someone will entertain systems that were built for slavery against every single person like that, let alone how sickly distinctly against people. And that's sustained, not for all the bad, but for the method, to discern the method. Forgiveness is not to give up. Forgiveness is to keep the method the subject. And that method has motivations A through Z, other than its own, used by its own law. So we have to, in other words, we have to deal with it. It's all right if people have their narrative. I'm not trying to debate their motivations. In other words, unless they want to debate me, the people who brought it up, and the people with the court made up lies, and with physical delusions. They pretended I was holding on to people's names, for example, from the past. That's one of the Christines that was brought up by confessions that people involved with the Whiting forensics police, with the Joshua Julian, and people that work with other forensics police tied to Joshua Julian, recorded, confessed, demonstrated involved with federal crimes, with child abusers of juxtaposed natures of child abusers simultaneously, identity theft, fraud. These are people that have their coaches of teams. Some of them have family members who are involved with identity theft, frauds, with the uses of narratives and pretended passions and emotions by religions, by religious rights, and by the rights of the Constitution, as frauds with little uses of that for political tricks, and where they've been slandering people from courts, using the courts to stack in fake things about people through time and their family members, putting fake evidences into databases as their roles with predicate acts on off job sites, coordinated as timed roles with predicate acts on off child campuses. So they try to pretend. I never had a class with Joe DeMoro. I never saw him around Wethersfield High School. They tried to make a few exceptions, like a handful of times. He would come as one of the people that would, they would record me to make an exception. So I wouldn't, because they need to pretend they were doing that in other contexts too. Because I have him involved with sequence shifts with people from my grammar school. I had nothing to do with him on grammar school. There was one day I remember him on my grammar school, and there was an Aaron Garvey, also involved with the intelligence community. I mean, she was like she was like my son. I never had a conversation with Aaron Garvey, but they abused her by forcing her to roles with the Wethersfield police chief's family. For example, and with these people involved with the Cololos, and with various natures of federal crimes with kids, and with doctors with kids. And they attached me to fake ties to a doctor and medical diagnosis as a kid. And that's one of the people involved with the Cololo families And there was also Scalora families. Weathersfield police said that Scaloras are also involved with them forging and switching names, fabricating police reports. Disgusting pigs with a principal sex offender and medical doctors that raised them, and the FBI director. With that punk coward Comey, is that a real FBI guy? But Robert Luskin, in his defendant capacities, involved with remote uses of the Congress of their sense and sensibilities, individually grouped them together. But we don't having mandated law followed at locations, New York City. All we have to do is let me report the sequence shifts in the names forging and switching at Connecticut interbranch as people rolls with the post-dated documents proven having been presented to the Ninth Circuit Court, having been post-dated from inside the Ninth Circuit Court to appear late and having appeared late to the panel of judges right before the World Trade Center attack, right next to it, that court. That proven led to a 2006 district court case now in Connecticut. Rather than that part of the case which had been in Manhattan right before the World Trade Center attack, and it has roles with the DeMauro families. There are two Joe DeMauros from two different families, intercities, associated with CCSU, involved with child campuses, intercities through time, child campuses in Rock Hill and Cromwell and Weathersfield and Hartford. Have people involved with foreign and domestic medical families that have been putting fake things into databases. There are people associated with the medical community and ones with badges at Quinnipiac University also having been used. See, it's uses of the identities of the campuses from off them, though, and then from on off them. Everyone forced to speak through others. So people at Trinity College said that they have a Joshua Stryker and some people with the name Oliver Olson that I never had communications with that pretended other. And they're involved with some girl who was involved with, like, her friend had guys that were like, I don't even want to go into it, where they shared her and they were pretending other at the same time. Then they were pretending not to like it to her. And in other words, as strangers that were then using that as lie about their nature relationship to me and lie about me pretending I knew other people, pretending me to fit in other people to fake locations, lying about their motivations for that, hiding all exception nature, inventing fake exceptions. So, in other words, these are people in Weathersfield since I was a kid, said that there are people on Covington Street in New Britain that themselves confirmed, confessed, demonstrated, record a whole bunch of people in Covington Street through time had roles with federal crimes on and off Zion Street next to Trinity College in Hartford with the intelligence community and with overt criminal enterprises, private ones, foreign and domestic military, just the family shared inter-campuses, inter-cities, interstates, worse than just internationally grouped, and then fluent through that. The breaching method has a complete remote possession of the integrity of sophistication and of everyone pretending it's other and pretending it's sophistication when it's not. And lying about where and how and why actually non-sophistication is called non-sophistication. Lying about where and how it's simultaneously sophistication. The invisible but still discernible, even individually grouped together, that is still discernible. It's still only part. Control each heart. Start, New York. Gather here. Round. Fake branches make fake branches make real drums. Be found. I'll gather round. So we just have to call out that through the hierarchy that has the complete possession
of the victim predator reactions effectively being and having been employed as self-valued roles with each branch of government's remote uses, originally and still. Vaccines. It kills and things. So it has something to do with the use of the corners of the streets. The corners of the streets on Hangdog Lane involved with identity thefts and frauds and make fake instances, and with how they use the drugs and medicines crimes roles to keep all the all bad. In other words, and with they're needing that fentanyl because they have been roles with the worst crimes and the worst patients and killers, and against innocent people, and with the prisons that house them, and the interbranch kept recorded as actually recorded, kept needing to hide the same final act of progressive lies, identity theft, fraud, slander, sequence shifts together, and offensively having been going out of their way to do such. I never had communications with anybody. I just paid for things, went in there one time, a boxing gym in Cromwell. Whole bunch of people tied to some judges and courts that have been used remotely, and people with the military associated with Dave. I don't know his last name. I don't know if that's his real name. Associated with houses next to the state prison officers that are also involved through time with the locations on Covington Street in New Britain connected to Zion Street in Hartford. And they have state police families. There are interstate state police families and FBI families and other agencies with other countries involved with some Olsen brothers involved with identity thefts and frauds and other natures of predicate acts and child abuse roles with people on my street that are also involved through the like about 10 months ago, Wethersfield police, and since they've been wire crimes with like recently. Still, they're playing games. they been forging, switching names, using Wethersfield town offices as one of the people involved with some untimely deaths that I forced people to tell the police on, because the strangers were telling me about all these confessions in cities that had connections to it. One of the untimely deaths, even if it was made up, it was on Trinity College's campus. And one of the untimely deaths is involved with the Wethersfield police. The families, both of them, were people associated with the families that answered phones for the Wethersfield police through time, like with the name Mendez, involved with identity thefts, fraud, slanders. I never said I talked with them when I talked about them on Facebook, one of the pages they took. They've been trying to make evidences, trying to make fake exceptions. They attached my family members to fake words with me and fake words with other people and about World Trade Center. So, and then they pretended things about when I said bad things, because it was to fake things. So in other words, I noted that too. They're in the background trying to adapt. So Hartford Hospital still needs to respond. I asked them for a paper. What are you guys doing? The first time they brought me there for mental evaluation, and there was 2 Brandon Leahys. Those are one of the ones involved planting evidences through time with the corners on the street. These are ones involved with Russian people and with the judges. Like there's a Judge Killian. There were other judges I don't know the names of, involved with drugs and medicines crimes, sexual crimes with little girls, identity thefts, frauds, all kinds of wire crimes, even down to they had cigarette boxes and they were selling them with people that were doing that after they already charged people for that. Then everyone started doing it. And with the probate court's family, the Della Fair family, and with this Joshua Julian, was also spreading lies he has roles with the faking emails with the FBI, and as people involved with the name Cololo also brought up confessions about the Joshua Julian. And so they were pretending me to fake ties and locations here with him. There's a Daryl Chandler is also one of the ones involved with Koreans, and that I don't know, that know my name, and people from Weathersfield High School that involved in the identity theft frauds with him, planting fabricated audio and video evidences. And reportedly he has a sister associated with a food bag. And he's involved with some military people on and off Fox Connecticut News in Hartford, Connecticut, also involved with the military police and the Mendez police and some Domain police. And that's also with the buildings next to them, involved with them with fabricating evidences, data reception, racketeering, worse than war crimes, evidence reception, worse than war crimes. And per the breaching method involved, their motivation, they only understand that they do sick things. They're fakes as integrity. And they also did it by lying about me to others behind my back, like the other sex especially too, and distinctly, not distinctly, and sequentially. So there was also Allison Mulcahy I never had a conversation with, or John Madden, and others told me that she pretended other, and Thaddeus Grabowski, who was one of the co-defendants of former director of the FBI in a 2006 district court case. He also has her involved with the two Mendez brothers and the main brothers. And there's the Joe DeMauro from Rocky Hill has a brother Tony DeMauro, and has a sister Paula DeMauro, involved with people at the Town Line Drive and Solstein Highway, involved with identity theft, frauds, falsified police reports with men and women associated with the McCord brothers. They forced, tricked them, hurt them to roles with former police chief and people that would paint arrays and fake, that would, if you respond to it, they lie about what came before that and the relevance of it. Now, these are people that also have remote uses of the sense and sensibilities and the remote timing of where they walk, where they look, of the black people, per the formal state's definition of black, of humanity's identity of volume. See, but where that volume science has prevented free speech because the black families are involved with identity theft, frauds, planting evidences, data reception racketeering, evidence reception racketeering, identity reception racketeering, worse than war crimes. So we must be able to tell on it. It knew that we would have to. So it effectively kept and keeps a whole bunch of juxtaposed natures of criminally foreign influence, fact, cheap nature, aspect, qualities, natures. That through other motivations, natures, needs, interests, times, instances, roles, uses of the ground, locations, roles. They can't defend themselves without, self-valuing roles with collusion. As that breaching method is employed, qualities of fact, cheap nature, ulterior than that one we have to be and can be now and will be. Take benches, bow. Say our name the fall. Say Romulus, be Romulus. In other words, so all we need to do, I have mandated law, follow sequence here. Follow sequence true. Call the campus with me. They've been replacing my word. They tell the people to say they didn't understand people when you say simple things. Some person brought up the Rob Rodriguez has roles with intelligence community on off Route 3 with the DeMauro families and with people with I never saw him on a campus I went to school at in my life. If it was in T-ball, I don't know, we played T-ball. In other words, Rob Rodriguez, he confirmed on Facebook, just like a Enzo Fiennes and his cousin confirmed on Facebook they had been influenced by a whole bunch of foreign and domestic influences with all these confessions. The only time I communicated with them. And with their girlfriends. And to my Saudi friend. And there's another Saudi person that wasn't connected with us, involved with them on Elm Street in Rocky Hill with WFSB investigators, involved with federal crimes with kids, and of juxtaposed natures and uses of that too, because they have uses of the types of investigators who then go pretend that they had legitimate time treatments. Oh, we were just controlling the conversation the way we do as our type of expert. They have the uses of it. So they use the Britain Superior Court recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed. They use the charge of harassment, and they fabricated wire crimes roles, also with NBC, Connecticut News, and other Connecticut news media, where they spread all these lies to hide their roles with what I caught them doing with families through time with the principal sex offenders campus, and with the uses of people tied to the other kids, of principals and of deans. Hey! Maxine, I teach you things belong. So you have to understand how they have these remote little rat trap fakes, with this Justin Kovinskis, who set up exceptions to pretend to know me. It has something to do his roles with that corner of South Street Highway and Town Line Drive too. They've been planting evidences intercities with the judges and their family members criminally involved. I never saw their motivations and their opinions about me are dishonest in backgrounds. In other words, little rat trap games. So there's a Sal Civiello too. He tried to make an exception to pretend to know me with a Eric Jensen. And that's why Eric Jensen, they had, in other words, on Town Line, on Two Rod Highway years ago. No, I had nothing to do with South Seville. I don't know. He was in my fourth grade class. I had nothing to do with them then. Now, it had something to do with the roles with a Morin family. And that's one of the mayors that is involved with some FBI lawyers and the former director of the FBI's co-defendants involved with Wethersfield town offices, with some guy involved with some gun threats and some violence with bug spray intercities connected, and some crimes with smoke with the fire departments and their family members criminally involved, and with identity theft, fraud, slander methods on off campuses behind people's backs and timing where they're going to go, even calling people to the office, crazy thing. In other words, vaccine. So Interbranch, Connecticut, had been switching and forging names. If you call the police, they forge and switch names. In other words, they're hiding behind how there are a whole bunch of other countries involved with these games. Well, I need a name for the Dean Alford involved with this too, or who was using his name, Dean Alford, on Trinity College, because there's a officer that uses the name Darth Vader, also criminally involved, and he was slandering. They confessed, demonstrated, recorded. They abused and Elizabeth Bearson, and they had me in fake conversation with other girls, and they lied about my communications with her, and with I think a guy named Dave tied to her and the end of the three spots at the end of the Berlin Turnpike, involved with people involved with identity theft, fraud, slanders, also in the form of falsified police reports roles, identity theft, fraud roles, and untimely death roles with people that on my street in Wethersfield, as the ones that were on off Trinity College since they were kids, on off Central Connecticut State University in New Britain since they were kids, involved with federal crimes with kids, men and women. So how they have the women roles interbranch distinctly from the male leader roles and grouped. There's also evidence. But we have to have a quality of fact treatment nature that's offensively being prevented by that which is not that which is consciously knowing and preventing people who are the only ones who are going to speak it right at each age from demonstrating it by putting in how the interbranch is personally, differentially, but increasingly criminally foreign influence, and simultaneously pretending other, and needing to do so preemptively. So, in other words, I don't know Lenny Triglio where he lives or how many people he involved with this, but I know he's his neighbors and his former Mayor Gold, and there are various natures, police forms, and car dealerships involved criminally, and different police forms with the Wethersfield Police. There's an MPO Floyd, and there's ones associated with Joshua Stryker and a Kovinskis. I don't know his brother's name, who's also involved with like abuses of a granddaughter of the house, of the with others at the corner of Griswold Street and Fairlane Drive. And that has something to do with the post offices. And that has all those, they put all those confessions at once with strangers. Then they pretend to know me years later as roles timed with distinct but connected confessions on and off Trinity College and on off my house in Wethersfield, and regarding people on and off the spot in Covington Street through time involved with them, with that, and houses on. So there's a CN Faglione family that is involved with various natures of courts, judges and prosecutors, and their and doctors, like a Leahy family of doctors involved with drugs and medicines crimes and sexual crimes roles, where they only understand a part of that. No one wants roles with that. They start making exceptions. Has roles with Quinnipiac University and with a Fred Gruzet, with people I recorded. I didn't know they had roles with Rick Cianfaglione. I never saw Rick Cianfaglione around my high school ever. I used to never see him around classes or anything, Rick Cianfaglione, in my high, and they were lying about the nature of relationship between people. And they were trying to start. I forgave Rick Cianfaglione right away because I thought it was just an accident. Or not an accident. I thought some kid just punched another kid because he came around the corner at the same time. And I didn't know him. When I was told to go there too. I was a good told, and then I remember I was mad. I didn't know how to punch back. And they just kept walking. So I figured it was, I don't know. I figured that was in first grade. And then years later, so then there was like one other instance with some kind of a trick. Some kind of tricks with like games between the kids that O'Brien family, executive police forms family had and has, and they have insights into their roles with Central Connecticut State University, with the criminal justice system, people that are trained to work for the leaderships of criminal justice in the prisons, at the places that work, other places that that work for it, people trained to work for the military, people trained to work for the state police, people trained to work for data reception, polling, all criminally foreign influenced. Simultaneously, delusions wrought, victims. In other words, they want to debate this, leaving out the means to have this demonstrated, which means we need to have the sequence shift counter, the names forging and switching, fabricating audio and video transcripts, and fake things, and pretended on campuses that are filmed 24/7. So they just pretend fake things were filmed that never were, because no one's checking. So they're increasingly exploiting at the interbranch locations. They have streams in there because they've been the roles with the worst uses of the ground locations and acts and actors, and against more and more innocents, self-value roles. They have a right to phone. They gave them the phone. We gave them that many minutes. Forget about it. So in other words, they've been using. I hope they have a whole bunch of people at Wesleyan, or not Wesleyan, Middletown campuses, Middletown courts are involved with their patients and criminals before they got caught, and they've been torturing them in the places. I'll give an affidavit. They were doing way worse at Whiting Forensics, where they were reported to have been torturing people. They were doing it against the innocent people too. They've been using their databases to put fake things into databases, and then as using that as evidences in cases, as roles and predicate acts against the people at locations and instances involved with instances, directly and indirectly, ones brought up in cases. So there are people associated with, there are men and women that were, when I was a kid, that confessed, recorded, demonstrated, that were tied to I forgot their name. I said it before, McCord. I don't see, they know my name. I don't know their first names. In other words, and the only reason I was around, I was begged to go on a football team. It was the second time I'm having an extended confession from a John Mile who just pulled up in front of my house after my car broke my senior year in high school. At my second time in senior year. It was because of one class, which is also involved with the Scalora family, confessions, and a DeMorrow, and with her boyfriends. They had multiple. These are sisters that had multiple boyfriends involved with my one of the clothes on my street, associated with this Phil Clo that Bob Chase with the forensics location, and others recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed is involved with the Phil Clo. Also with there's a Joshua Julian who also confirmed, confessed, demonstrated, recorded on Facebook. His roles having been using my name criminally with the parents of the school. And now there was one parent they have in one of the stories about the principal child abuser after the fact, that they have involved with, in other words, with the judges and prosecutors and people that work for the courts and police forms that were criminally involved with my town's police chief too, and his daughter and her extended family members, as with people with houses next to Webb School, involved with them with identity thefts and frauds, of people with the O'Brien family, and the background at the campuses I went to, and uses of that. So we need to get them on paper and to one name and sequence, and to stop names forging and switching, because they have all these methods. And if you call up and try to report what was reported about the school, there's no words. There's a dentist family or something like that reported by Wethersfield police confirmed. There's a Scalora families, intercities involved. They were being forced to forge and switch names by other people associated with the former director of the FBI, federal criminals, before they got caught. And with the Scalora family, has been attaching me and Saudi families to fake locations, also with other Saudis, though. The ones who attacked, and the other ones, I don't know the names of. And some guy I don't know the name of, who was young, must have had another family associated with the Arbach Hill Athletic Center. And there's the Joe DeMore from Wethersfield recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed, and one of the Kerrs from Wethersfield with the Rock Hill Athletic Center, Elm Street, and all along Route 3. They have roles. They had been planting evidences with a Judge Smith, who confirmed, demonstrated, recorded this, simultaneously pretending other. I had to write a complaint about him doing that, attaching me and others to fake locations, fake natures of ties to each other, fake ties to each other, complete strangers, fake locations. He has roles with people who stole from a Subway Bajario, stole a speaker box. I don't know what he did with it. I never took a speaker box. I never had it from a guy Joe, and he was involved with the for the with falsifying police reports roles with the Jeremy Grohl and the Subby Bajario and this Kevin Dillon, who's also involved with juxtaposed natures of child abuses, identity thefts, and frauds, as men and women that were involved also with drugs and medicines crimes with the courts and the police forms associated with them, and with their attaching little kids to fake locations, fake ties to themselves, fake natures of ties to themselves, roles on off the state prison offices and on off the state judicial branches offices with connected instances with that. It's also people from sixth grade kids years ago confessed and recorded, people associated with that Lena's Pizza place, and or some place on the bar, what it was at the time or whatever, on Park Street, associated with Lance Cuddy. Lance Cuddy is one of the ones I also never had a class with, never saw him around campuses. And never had anything to do with, never had a conversation with him. They tried to paint an exception. I walked by him and he was in a driveway in a house next to the state prison offices. The house next to it has a daughter that was abused by the people associated with the Dillon guy, police forms, with the Westfield police, and some other house on Fairlane of a guy who said he was his partner to a speech class I had to take again my next senior year with another woman teacher who was also friends with that woman teacher with the speech class, who was also as well. So never had a personal conversation with either of them, but they are involved with drugs and medicines crimes, with doctors and with cliques that are with overt criminal enterprises and private ones, even if it's only undercover. They actually have predicate acts roles and methods with them as actually recorded. Identity theft, fraud, slanders, methods, roles with them actually recorded and relevant to the method as this identity theft, fraud, slander method. The value of sequence denial method. The value of what is simultaneously actually recorded denial method. What is simultaneously actually recorded when you look at what slavery against Black people by the laws manifest, sickly, distinctly North and South, and witch trials at the same time, simultaneously their value. What was that? Why was the witch trial place right next to why is it still there? Where and how George Washington had to leave slavery entrenched in the North and South? Why is that not self-valued as means to discern how the North and South actually were motivated to entertain such self-valued, used remotely, self-valuing it? Our founding parents didn't self-value it. They only self-valued means and needs to hide their real motivations, nature, needs, interests, telling everyone to get the Constitution unabridged, that Wills Woods put up, and getting Marbury versus Madison. Quote, real justice must satisfy all appearances of real justice, end quote, per my father. Gary Wall, pro se litigate, accomplished pro se litigate with union stuff. And that's the same union as recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed, involved with predicate acts on and off Trinity College. Off locations, off it, also on off it with the police forms, on off it, and how their forms also private with this officer with the name, who uses the name Darth Vader. So they lied to Elizabeth Beerson about me. I'm sorry, Elizabeth, I had to use your name. I don't know if Beers. But this Joshua Stryker did that when I was a kid too, with some co-defendants, a former director of the FBI, Robert Luskin, in a 2006 district court case, who had been planting evidences through time behind my back, identity theft, frauds, timed and increasingly. So these are people intercities who coordinated that too. And it's a whole bunch of ways on off the state judicial branch offices and all, which is right by Route 3. And there's also a little road right there with the Fianza family. Then also I got to confirm their confessions, like regarding their ties to the body dumping spot of Billy Grasso. And with their business of their family and extended family. Also with that street and the roles with uses of that a number of different times. Their identity thefts and frauds instances tied to, and as while they knew they had roles with data reception, evidence reception, and identity reception, racketeering, sequence shifts, value reception, racketeering, what's the word crime? Like when people debate about the value of where and how, we could discern people lying to ourselves and to them or to themselves or others when they make treatments by black and white, not by seeing if it's a prejudice or not, by discerning if they could handle the honesty, which honesty reveals we need to be and haven't been a quality of fact human nature to use such things to tap into where positive value nature progressions action natures individually grouped and together or become simultaneously when we use the right system. Otherwise, individually grouped and together, negative value nature progressions action natures are demonstrated. Again, that is self-valued by everyone's logic. That can't defend itself and afford that quality of fact human nature as the sciences, as the campuses, as the republic, with short words. And that which is hyper-evidential. No one could stand correlation nature simultaneously inherent active aggressive, certain type of child abuse. That's why I caught them doing uses of the types of abuses juxtaposed and the self-value uses of the self-value types of experts. When did the FBI have integrity? Put up that uses of black and white. They had the obligations formally to counter that, not us. Get them down. I'll gather round, Boxing. I teach you things, but alone. Boxing's come home. Thank you, everybody. Let's end. Forever's course will teach us all right then. Thank you.